It is said that in a desert where the wind has no name, there stands the outline of a temple, not of worship but of listening. Its pillars, half swallowed by centuries of sand, rise like broken notes from a song the earth once knew. At night, when the stars bloom in their ancient rhythm, the air seems to shimmer with something almost spoken. Travelers who pass through this place do not speak. They feel. They sense a hum beneath the stillness, as if the very ground remembers voices that once reached upward, voices carried to the sky like threads of light. The moon here is different. It does not merely shine. It watches. It has watched for ages. Its pale gaze drapes the ruins in silver dust, tracing the edges of forgotten carvings, spirals, circles, constellations. Once, this was a living map of the heavens, each stone aligned with a star that now drifts elsewhere in the sky. The priests who walked here, it is said, believed that the cosmos was not distant, but alive, that stars could feel devotion, and that light was a form of speech. Their nights were not of sleep, but of listening, for they believed the sky would whisper back to those who learned its rhythm. Beneath the broken arches you can almost hear them, soft, rhythmic murmurs carried by wind. Their prayers were not words, but tones, deep, low, vibrating through bone and sand alike, a song that matched the pulse of the universe. The ancients called it the breath of Orion, believing that when sung correctly, the stars themselves would tremble, answering in a shimmer of unseen sound. Some believe that this temple was more than stone, that it was a bridge, not of distance, but of resonance, built not to reach the gods, but to remind the sky of its own reflection on earth. The priests stood barefoot on cold marble, eyes closed, hands raised toward the night. Around them, candles flickered within bowls of copper dust, smoke curling upward in perfect spirals, as though obeying an unseen geometry. In that silence they sang. No instrument, no melody, only breath, only vibration. Their songs were said to be the sound of remembering, for they believed the universe itself had once sung the world into being, and that through devotion, humanity might one day hum that same creation song once more. Archaeologists who later stumbled upon the site found something strange carved into the walls. Not words, not pictures, but patterns. Interlocking circles that seemed to echo star charts. Some align perfectly with the Pleiades, others with vanished constellations now lost to precession. Yet, there are patterns that match nothing known. They shimmer faintly when touched by moonlight, as if waiting for a note, a vibration, to wake them. The scholars called it coincidence. The poets called it memory. It is whispered that once, in a night thick with stillness, a traveler camped near the ruins heard what he could not explain. He described it as a tone, long and distant, rising from the air itself, not loud but vast. It trembled through his skin like a memory he could not recall. Some say it was wind passing through the hollow chambers of broken walls. Others say it was the sky, remembering how to sing. The ancients believed that when the earth grew too silent, the stars forgot their purpose. They feared silence more than darkness, so they sang not for themselves, but to keep the world awake. They sang to keep the cosmos breathing. And when their voices faded, perhaps the sky mourned them, whispering their songs through the desert wind. Imagine walking there now, beneath the unending firmament, your feet sinking softly into the cool sand. The air is still, except for the low hum of the horizon. Above, the constellations glimmer, each one a frozen echo of an ancient name. The Milky Way stretches like a river of dust, flowing above the temple's ruins. You feel something, not sound, not thought, but recognition, as though the stars have turned their faces toward you. And neither, perhaps, has the temple that still faces them, waiting not for worship, but for wonder. It is said that far beyond the fields of time, in a valley carved from quiet itself, a river once flowed that carried more than water, carried names, not written, not carved, spoken. Each name, released upon its surface, was believed to travel to the place where memory never dies. At dawn, the river shimmered like liquid glass. Mists rose from its edges in soft, silver veils, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and salt. Along its banks stood smooth stones marked with faint spirals, old as breath, old as grief. The people of that valley lived without monuments, without graves, without books. Their only record was the river. When someone died, their loved ones gathered at the edge, cupping the water in their hands, whispering the person's name before letting the current carry it away. To them, remembrance was not a matter of keeping. It was a matter of letting go. The elders called it the passage of breath. They taught that every name is a bridge between sound and silence, body and spirit, moment and eternity. Once spoken into the current, it belonged no longer to the living. The river would remember it, repeat it, soften it, until it dissolved into rhythm, until the name became indistinguishable from the song of the world itself. It is said that at night, when the moon stood full and round, the water would glow faintly, as though filled with the voices of those who had been released. You could stand there, in that stillness, and hear the low murmur of thousands of names. Not loud, not distinct, but layered like wind through reeds. Travelers who stumbled upon that place by chance often wept without knowing why. They said the sound felt familiar, like being called by something that had known them before they were born. Over centuries, the river changed course. Floods came, then droughts. The valley grew silent, and the people vanished into their own legend. The water retreated beneath layers of stone, hiding its current underground. Only the faint echo of its music remained, a vibration in the earth, a hum that deepens at dusk. Some say that if you lie flat upon the soil and place your ear to the ground, you can still hear it, a slow, endless whisper, repeating names that the world has forgotten. Archaeologists once found small clay vessels buried near the site, each sealed with resin and filled with water that had not evaporated. When opened, the air around them shifted. The water made no sound, but those who held the jars swore they felt a soft trembling, like a heartbeat too faint to measure. One researcher wrote in her field notes, "It feels as though something is still being spoken inside." The vessel cracked later that night, and when they returned to examine it, the water had disappeared into the earth. Legends tell of a priestess who once tended the river. She wore robes the color of dusk and never spoke except to the current. Her duty was to keep the names moving, to ensure none lingered too long on the surface. For when a name refused to sink, it was said the soul it belonged to could not rest. She would walk barefoot into the stream, humming softly until the water stilled, and then the name would vanish beneath the surface like breath fading in cold air. When she grew old, she asked that her own name be left unspoken, so she might remain within the hush she had tended all her life. There are no boundaries here between time and memory. Every breath seems older than your life. You begin to sense why the priests believed the stars could hear them, for in this silence, listening itself becomes sacred. There are stories that on windless nights, her reflection still appears upon the buried stream. A shimmer of silver cloth, a hand raised in benediction, though no water runs there now. The villagers who live nearby do not build wells upon that land. They say the ground still remembers, and to dig too deep is to disturb the dreams of the departed. Some scholars dismiss these tales as poetry, metaphors for grief, they say. But those who have stood upon that valley at dusk speak differently. They say the air vibrates faintly, as though filled with invisible wings. They say the silence there feels thick, not empty, as if something enormous, ancient, and gentle listens from beneath. One poet once wrote of the place, "It is where the world exhales." And perhaps that is true, for if you listen long enough, the valley itself seems to breathe, slow, patient, eternal. And in that breath, you begin to understand what those people knew, that remembrance is not the act of clinging, but of release. Imagine standing there now, the ground cool beneath your feet, the horizon burning with the faint embers of sunset. The wind has stilled. The air holds its breath. You close your eyes and whisper a name, perhaps your own, into the emptiness. For a heartbeat, nothing stirs. Then, from somewhere unseen, a single ripple of sound rises, soft as the turning of a page. The earth seems to answer. The sound fades, but the feeling remains, as though your name has been taken gently, carried onward into some vast, unseen current. Perhaps that is what happens to everything we love. Perhaps nothing is truly lost, only translated, turned into sound, into water, into the endless murmuring of the world. It is said that when the first river dried, the sky took pity and gathered its song into the clouds. Every time it rains, the elders believed, those same names fall again, carried by droplets, whispered into oceans, absorbed into air. And when lightning threads across the horizon, it is the river remembering itself. The flash of every name ever spoken, shining for a moment, then vanishing back into silence. If you ever find that hidden valley and stand above its invisible stream, do not speak loudly. Bow your head as they once did. Feel the weight of quiet pressing against your skin. You will not hear the river, but you might sense its pulse beneath your feet. Steady, endless, forgiving. For even when water disappears, its path remembers. Even when names fade, the silence that held them remains. And perhaps that is enough. The valley keeps no monuments, no markers, no signs. Only a faint echo in the wind, a low hum that might be earth or memory or something between. And as night descends, and the stars lean closer, you may think you hear it, the soft recitation of everything that ever was, carried onward into the infinite hush. Some nights, when the air is clear and the moon stands high, the sands shift as if stirred by invisible footsteps. A faint chime seems to drift through the ruins, soft, metallic, like the sound of a bell carried from another age. The desert listens, patient and eternal. Perhaps the song has never truly ended. Perhaps it only waits for someone who still knows how to hear. The river is gone. The names endure. And somewhere beneath the dust, the world still whispers them back. It is said that deep within the spine of an ancient fortress, where stone breathes cold and the air itself seems to remember the weight of centuries, there lies a hall that has not seen daylight for 1,000 years. They call it the chamber where light forgot its way. It is not marked on any plan, nor mentioned in any record. Even the architects who built the fortress are said to have left no notes of its making, as if they were forbidden to remember. Yet stories persist. Soldiers once spoke of faint glows underfoot, of voices humming without mouths, of a darkness so complete it felt alive. The legend begins with an accident or perhaps a choice. In the age when the fortress was first raised, a sect of mystics served the king. They were not priests nor scholars, but something between, keepers of what they called the geometry of light. They believed illumination was not simply brightness, but awareness, and that light itself carried memory, that every beam that ever touched the earth retained a trace of what it had seen. Their greatest work, it is said, was a chamber meant to capture that memory. A place where light could be purified of its worldly reflections, stripped of image, and returned to its original silence. The construction took 30 years. Each stone was cut to precise angles, polished until it gleamed like water. Mirrors of obsidian were set into the walls, aligned to catch a single shaft of sunlight at noon. For one brief moment each day, light would enter the chamber, travel through its mirrors, and vanish into a prism of crystal at the center. The mystics said the crystal would swallow the sun, not to hoard it, but to preserve the world's first dawn within its heart. But something went wrong. The stories say that one noon, the light entered as always golden pure. Yet when it reached the crystal, it did not refract. It did not leave. It stayed. The mirrors dimmed, the floor grew cold, and the chamber began to absorb all brightness from the air. Torches extinguished themselves. The glow of the workers' eyes vanished. Even their reflections in the obsidian disappeared, leaving only the sound of their breathing. The mystics called out, but no echo returned. The light had gone inward, into the stone, into the silence, as though it had found something it longed to remember. When the door was opened, the darkness spilled out like water. Those who stood nearby said it was not absence they felt, but weight, a deep pressure, like the presence of something immense and listening. The hall was sealed that same night. Centuries passed. The fortress changed hands. Kings rose and fell, and the chamber's story faded into superstition. Yet those who sleep near its walls speak of strange dreams, Visions of colorless landscapes, soundless skies, suns that burn without heat. One scholar who lived within the fortress in later years claimed that the stones sometimes glimmer faintly from within, as if remembering light long after losing it. He wrote, "It is as though the darkness here does not oppose light, but protects it." It is said that the temple once had a ceiling of black stone, polished until it mirrored the night perfectly. When the priests sang, their voices would rise and reflect downward, weaving with the starlight until it seemed as if heaven itself breathed within the hall. The ceiling has long since fallen, shattered by centuries of wind and neglect. Yet even now, when the wind passes through at dusk, its tone resonates with uncanny harmony, as though some hidden chamber still remembers the pitch of devotion. In the heart of that sealed room, the crystal remains. Those who have glimpsed it through cracks in the stone say it does not reflect the torchlight brought to it. It consumes it gently, leaving the air cool and blue. The crystal is said to contain within it the faintest image of a sun suspended in endless dusk, neither rising nor setting. Some claim that, if you stare into it long enough, you begin to see shapes, doorways, faces, fragments of landscapes that shift like memory trying to recall itself. It is whispered that the mystic's final prayer was not to banish light, but to teach its stillness, to give radiance a home where it could rest from its eternal journey. They believed that light wandered endlessly, carrying all that it had seen, the faces of the living, the fall of cities, the shimmer of seas, and that it longed, as all things do, for a place to lay its memories down. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, the chamber hums. The sound is faint, like air drawn through a flute. It rises slowly, then fades, as if the stone itself exhales. No one has ever found its source. Some say it is the light dreaming. Others say it is the silence trying to speak. When the moon is full, a strange thing happens. The fortress walls reflect her pale glow, all except the stones above the sealed door. There, the surface remains dark, as though no light dares to touch it. Yet if one stands still and listens, the air beneath those stones seems to vibrate softly, the way it does before dawn, that breathless pause before the first light returns. Travelers sometimes ask why no one has ever opened the chamber. The answer is simple. Those who have tried never succeed. The door remains cold and smooth, unyielding to force or flame. Tools dull, hinges crack, and the air thickens until breath becomes difficult. As if something inside is holding its own stillness intact. As if light itself has decided it no longer wishes to be seen. Perhaps it is not darkness that lives there, but peace, the resting place of every beam, every spark, every reflection that has ever touched the world. Perhaps the chamber is not a tomb, but a sanctuary, a place where light, exhausted by its duty to reveal, finally closed its eyes. If you were to walk through the fortress at dusk, you would know when you drew near. The corridors would grow cooler, your shadow fainter. The sound of your footsteps would seem to drift away before reaching the walls. And if you stood by that sealed door long enough, you might feel a warmth against your chest, faint, like sunlight filtered through stone. A reminder that even in darkness, light endures, hidden but alive, waiting for the moment the world grows quiet enough for it to return. It is said that one day, when the final sun sets and the stars close their eyes, the chamber will open on its own. The light within will not burst forth or blind. It will rise gently, like the slow bloom of dawn after an endless night, and it will carry with it every memory it ever held, every glint, every reflection, every life it ever touched, before vanishing softly into the breath of creation once more. Until then, the chamber sleeps. The fortress endures. The world above continues to chase the day. And far below, in that sealed hollow of stone, the last light of the first morning waits. Silent, patient, unforgotten. The desert does not forget. It only hides. It is said that in the emptiest part of the plain, where the horizon folds itself into silence and even the wind forgets its name, there stands a single stone. Smooth as bone, tall as a man, older than the memory of any kingdom. It has no markings, no seams, no sign of origin. By day, it gleams faintly under the sun, as though swallowing light instead of reflecting it. By night, it hums, low, steady, like the deep breath of something asleep. The villagers who live miles away call it the sleeper. They say it fell from the heavens long before time began, a fragment of a forgotten star, or perhaps the heart of a mountain that once floated in the sky. Others believe it was raised by the hands of the first people, those who could hear the language of stone. None agree on what it is, but all who have stood before it share the same feeling, that the stone is listening. The plain around it is barren. No grass grows near its base, no insects sing. And yet the air there feels thick, charged, almost kind. Travelers who rest beside it wake from vivid dreams. Dreams of skies turned inside out, of oceans that reflect upward, of voices speaking in tones too vast for words. One scholar wrote that when he placed his hand upon it, his pulse slowed until he could no longer tell where his heartbeat ended and the stone began. It is said the stone once sang. The story comes from a time before writing, passed through generations like a breath. The elders tell of a night when the sky was closer to the earth, when stars trembled like candles above the hills. In that age, the world was still learning the shape of silence. And from that silence, this stone rose, not by force, but by longing. It grew upward, yearning toward the stars that had once been its kin. The people of that land called it the dreaming stone. They believed it could hear the heavens, that it translated their light into sound. On nights when the moon was full, they would gather around it, closing their eyes and wait. Slowly, softly, the air would begin to vibrate. A tone low enough to feel in the ribs, pure enough to still the mind. It was not a melody, but something deeper, the sound of distance remembering itself. They built no temple around it, offered no prayers. They simply listened, for in that sound, they believed, lay the proof that the world was awake. The tone would travel for miles, echoing through the soil, reaching wells, mountains, and bones. It was said to calm storms, to make seeds sprout faster, to guide the lost back home. And then, one night, it stopped. No one knows why. Some say the stone grew lonely, unheard by the generations that forgot to listen. Others say the stars turned their faces away, leaving the stone mute in its grief. Whatever the reason, the sound faded, and the plain fell silent. Those who came after could not imagine it had ever sung. But the silence it left behind was not empty. It was full, heavy, deliberate, almost tender, as though the stone had not died, but withdrawn into its own dreaming. In recent years, when night grows long and the air clear, some claim the sound has returned, not in volume but in presence. Scientists who set instruments beside it record faint frequencies beyond hearing, pulses that mimic the rhythm of the Earth's magnetic breath. One researcher called it a lullaby written for gravity itself. To the villagers, it is simpler. They say the stone dreams, that when stars move across the sky, it remembers what it once was, a fragment of flight, a piece of light fallen from endlessness. They believe that when it dreams deeply enough, its hum becomes the world's heartbeat, reminding everything that lives to rest. When dawn finally comes, the first light spreads across the sand like spilled gold. The ruins seem to exhale, a long, weary sigh, as if waking from a dream. The stars fade, but not completely. Their afterglow lingers upon the stone, shimmering like the last traces of a melody too vast to end. At dawn, the stone changes color. It turns from gray to silver to the faintest blush of gold, as if reflecting not the sun, but some older light behind it. Birds circle it but never land. Children are told not to touch it, though sometimes, quietly, they do, and those who do swear they feel warmth beneath the surface, as though something beneath the stone stirs gently, still alive. Once, during a long drought, the villagers gathered at its base. The ground had cracked, the rivers had retreated, and the air itself seemed to thirst. In desperation, they sang to the stone, wordless tones, simple and steady, like imitating the hum of bees or wind through hollow reeds. As they sang, the air grew heavy, and the clouds began to gather. Rain came before dawn. The people called it coincidence. The elders called it remembrance. They said the stone had not forgotten their voices. It had only been waiting for them to remember its song. Now, when the sky is clear and the moon rises alone, some still go to sit beside it. They bring no offerings, no prayers, no light, only stillness. And in that stillness, if they are very quiet, they sometimes feel a vibration travel through the ground, up through their legs, into the chest, slow, deep kind. Perhaps the stone never stopped dreaming. Perhaps it is not we who listen to it, but it that listens to us, measuring our silence, weighing our noise, waiting for us to hum again in the rhythm of stars. And perhaps when it finally wakes, it will not speak. It will simply rise, not in movement, but in meaning, reminding the heavens of what they once were, close, vast, and alive. Until then, the stone stands patient on the plain, a monument not to what has fallen, but to what still remembers. By day it absorbs the light. By night, it hums faintly, barely audible, yet endlessly steady. A dream that never ended. A sky that never forgot. And somewhere between them both, the silence hums the name of everything that ever wished to rise. And so the temple remains, part memory, part silence, part unanswered song. The sky still arches above it, infinite and patient, as if waiting to be spoken to once more. It is said that somewhere beyond the reach of maps, where the last winds grow tired and even the stars seem to forget their names, there lies a garden that does not belong to any season. It blooms in silence. Its flowers do not die, and though no road leads there, it is said that every soul visits it once, not in life, not in death, but in the stillness between the two. They call it the garden at the edge of time. Those who claim to have glimpsed it in dream, in vision, in the soft haze of near forgetting, describe a place untouched by decay. The air there is blue with memory. Rivers of light wander through moss-covered stones. Trees rise like slow breaths, their branches veined with silver, their leaves glimmering faintly as though made from fragments of forgotten dawns. Flowers open and close without hurry, guided not by sun or moon, but by the quiet rhythm of thought itself. At the garden's center, there is said to be a pool, small, still, perfectly round. Its surface does not reflect the sky above, for there is none. Instead, it reflects the faces of those who stand before it, not as they are, but as they remember being. The young appear older, the old appear whole. Some see themselves as children running barefoot through light. Others see shadows walking beside them, smiling with eyes they had long forgotten. No one speaks there, for speech would disturb the balance. The air carries a calm so deep it feels like mercy. It is whispered that this garden was planted by time itself, long before history began to count its days. When the universe was young and still tender, it needed a place to rest, a cradle to gather all that was yet unborn. From that stillness, time uncoiled like a vine, growing outward, spinning galaxies, weaving destinies. But the garden remained, its soil untouched, its roots deep in eternity. It became the heart of remembering, where everything lost eventually returns. In the oldest myths, there is mention of the keepers of bloom, gentle figures who tend this garden without shadow or shape. They are not gods nor spirits, but echoes, the essence of care itself. They walk slowly between the luminous plants, brushing their fingers against petals that glow at their touch. They are said to prune time, cutting away sorrow that has grown too long, watering hope where it has wilted, gathering fallen moments and pressing them into seeds. Those seeds are then cast into the river of time, drifting downward toward the waking world. When one takes root in a heart, it appears as a sudden memory of peace, a dream of laughter you cannot place, a smell of rain you have never felt, a name that feels like home though you've never heard it spoken. Some say the souls of poets and wanderers visit the garden in sleep. They wake with tears and no reason for them. They write of meadows that shimmer like thought, of flowers that hum quietly, of a clock with no hands standing among the roots of an ancient tree. The tree's bark is etched with faint symbols that change when you look away, fragments of every story ever told, mingling with those still waiting to be written. There is no sun there, no moon. Yet light exists, gentle, pale, without direction. It feels not cast, but remembered, as though the world itself glows from within. The scent of the air is impossible to name. Some say it smells like old paper, others like rain on stone, or the skin of someone once loved. And time moves differently there. It does not flow. It breathes. One inhalation, one exhalation, and centuries are born or undone. Flowers bloom and close within the same sigh. The keepers move among them, unhurried, humming softly. It is said their song is the sound of all things returning home. When the last leaf falls from a dying tree in our world, it does not vanish. It appears there, reattached, whole again, gleaming in soft gold. When the last word of a forgotten language disappears from mortal lips, it blossoms there as a petal, delicate, luminous, fragrant with memory. The garden gathers all that slips away from us. Every laugh, every kindness, every thought unfinished, and gives it shape again in silence. Perhaps the priests never vanished. Perhaps their voices became the wind itself, circling the planet endlessly, searching for ears willing to remember the language of starlight. Some travelers of spirit claim that the garden lies at the very threshold between existence and what waits beyond. Those who walk there at the end of their journey do not weep. They sit among the flowers, feeling the pulse of eternity beneath their palms. They see time folding inward like a wave retreating from the shore, leaving patterns in the sand that glow and fade, like breath. And in that rhythm they understand. Nothing is lost, only transformed. There are stories of those who have tried to bring pieces of the garden back. A leaf, a drop of its water, a single seed. None succeeded. Whatever is taken fades to dust by morning. Yet, those who returned from it carry something invisible in their gaze. A stillness, a listening. They speak more softly, move more slowly, as though every sound from the waking world might bruise the silence they left behind. The poets say that the garden calls to us not from distance, but from within, that every time we pause long enough to feel beauty, every time we forgive, every time we remember without clinging, we open a small gate in the heart and let its fragrance pass through. Some even say that the first dream of humankind came from there, that when the world was still dark, the garden whispered an image into our sleeping minds. A field of light, a pool that reflected truth, and the soft promise that nothing ends. It is said that when time itself reaches its final breath, when stars grow dim and oceans close their eyes, the garden will awaken fully. The keepers will step forward and gather the petals of all that has ever been. The pool will ripple once, and everything that ever lived will see itself whole again. Not beginning, not ending, just returning. And then, perhaps, the garden will bloom one last time. Its flowers will shine brighter than dawn. Its rivers will hum the names of every soul. And in that infinite, gentle moment, the edge of time will no longer be an ending, but a circle closing softly around everything that ever was. So if someday you dream of walking barefoot through light, of hearing a song you cannot name, of finding a place that feels both strange and known, do not rush to wake. You are only visiting what waits for all of us. The garden is patient. The garden remembers. And somewhere, beyond the ticking of the stars, or perhaps the sky still remembers even when we do not, it is still blooming. It is said that within the ruins of a volcanic city, one swallowed whole by fire and silence, there lies a single chamber untouched by ash. The stones around it are blackened and fractured, yet the air inside remains still, faintly warm, faintly glowing, as if time itself paused there to hold its breath. In the center of that chamber, resting upon a pedestal of glass turned opaque with age, lies a scroll, not written in ink, not etched or painted, merely sealed within crystal, its surface clear yet unreachable. They call it the scroll that spoke without words. It was first found by those who dug among the ruins, searching for memory in the debris of disaster. When the crystal was lifted into daylight, witnesses swore the air shimmered around it, a ripple, like heat rising from stone. Inside, faint shadows moved, not letters, not symbols, but shapes that seemed alive, rearranging themselves in slow rhythm. One scholar thought they were reflections of firelight. Another thought they were illusions of dust. Yet when night came, the shadows glowed faintly on their own, and the chamber filled with a low hum, a note so deep it could be felt rather than heard. Those who stayed beside it too long began to dream. They spoke of cities made of glass, of voices that traveled through light instead of air, of beings whose language was not spoken but seen. One dreamer awoke claiming that the scroll contained no words because it was a word, a single utterance so vast it could only be understood in silence. He called it the breath of the beginning. Whispers tell that the scroll was not written by human hands, but formed naturally, shaped by the heat of creation itself. When the world was still molten, when stars first touched the surface of the newborn earth, some say the light cooled in such a way that it remembered what it had seen. The scroll, then, would be not an artifact, but a record of light's first memory, the universe's own reflection, condensed into a single breathing silence. Centuries passed. Scholars carried it from one city to another, trying to decipher its movements. Some claimed the shifting shadows inside followed the pulse of the viewer's heart, mirroring emotion rather than meaning. When touched, though few dared, the crystal grew warm, and faint lines of luminescence spiraled outward from its core, forming patterns like constellations. Each time the design changed, the same observer never saw it repeat. It was brought once to a monastery perched above the clouds, where monks who had renounced speech spent their days listening to wind and prayer. They placed the crystal scroll in the center of their sanctuary and waited. For 7 nights, nothing happened. On the 8th, as the moon aligned with the mountain's peak, a single ray of light entered through a narrow slit in the roof and struck the crystal. The scroll responded, its interior flaring with soft gold, its hum deepening into a tone that resonated through every stone of the monastery. The monks did not move. They listened, and in that sound, they said later, they felt as though they were being remembered. The next morning, the crystal dimmed again. But something in the monastery had changed. The bells no longer needed to be rung. They chimed of their own accord whenever the wind passed through. The walls felt warmer, and when one stood in silence long enough, the sound of a slow heartbeat could be heard beneath the floor. Steady, ancient, patient. The monks believed the scroll had not spoken to them, but through them that by listening they had become its language. In time, the scroll vanished. Some say it was taken by pilgrims who believed it to be divine. Others think it simply dissolved, returning to the light it came from. But travelers who pass through that ruined valley at dusk sometimes report seeing a pale glow deep in the rock, like a breath held behind glass. The air there vibrates gently, as though the earth is whispering through its sleep. For in the hush between heartbeats, when the night grows tender and the air turns thin, if you listen with all that you are, you may hear it too. A vibration older than sound, a whisper not of words, but of remembrance. There are many theories about what the scroll meant, if meaning is even the right word. Historians call it a myth of communication. Philosophers call it a mirror of consciousness. But among those who dream deeply, there is another belief, that the scroll was never a message to us, but from us, a fragment of future memory sent backward through time, reminding creation of what it once knew. It is said that everything that has ever existed leaves behind a pattern of resonance, a kind of echo too quiet for the ear, too subtle for the eye. The scroll, then, may be that echo made visible, the hum of all thought, all longing, all love, suspended between light and silence. When we stand before beauty and cannot find words, when we feel the ache of recognition for something we've never seen, perhaps we are hearing what the scroll still says, in a language older than sound. And perhaps the reason it cannot be read is because it was never meant to be. Its message is not for the mind, but for the space between heartbeats, for the part of us that listens even when asleep. If you ever find yourself in that ruined valley, wait until the sky turns violet and the last birds vanish into shadow. Stand where the fire once passed, and you may feel it, a warmth along your palm, a pulse beneath the wind. For though the scroll is gone, its breath lingers. Close your eyes, listen carefully. You may hear it, not a word, not a song, but the faint, rising tone of something vast remembering its own beginning. It does not need translation. It does not need belief. It only needs silence. For the scroll still speaks, not in sound, not in light, but in the patient rhythm of existence itself. And when you are still enough to hear it, you will understand. The universe has never stopped speaking. It has only been whispering all along. It is said the stars do not speak anymore. But sometimes, when the desert is still and the moon hangs low, they seem to listen. And in that silence, in that long, unbroken breath, the sky remembers. Every voice, every song, every prayer that was ever carried to its waiting light. It is said that beyond the last dunes of the known world, where the wind moves like memory and the stars fall closer than clouds, there lies a desert that was once a kingdom. Beneath its surface, swallowed by centuries of silence, sleep statues so immense that their faces alone could eclipse the moon. Their eyes are closed. Their lips are soft, as though frozen mid-breath. They call it the Valley of the Sleeping Gods. No map leads there. The dunes shift each season, hiding the path as though protecting what lies beneath. Yet travelers who wander too far into that desert speak of strange formations half buried in sand. The curve of a cheek, the crest of a crown, the faint outline of a hand turned upward as if waiting for rain. When the wind changes direction, the dunes move like waves, uncovering what looks, for a moment, like the remnants of an enormous body resting just below the surface. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it disappears again. Scholars say these statues were carved by an ancient civilization that worshipped silence as divine. But the locals whisper otherwise. They say these are not statues at all, but the gods themselves, beings who grew tired of eternity and chose to lay down upon the earth to dream. Their breath, it is said, became the wind. Their eyelids, the shadows that drift across the dunes at dusk. There is a legend that when the first people of the desert walked this land, the gods still stirred. Their movements caused tremors beneath the sand. Their sighs shaped the valleys. Their tears filled hidden wells. The people would gather in the hollows at night and place their palms upon the ground, feeling the faint pulse beneath their fingers. They called it the heartbeat of the buried sky. And when storms swept across the desert, they said it was not anger, but restlessness, the gods turning in their sleep. One story tells of a wanderer who found the mouth of an enormous temple buried in the side of a dune. He entered alone, carrying only a lamp and a bowl of water. The passage spiraled downward, its walls carved with symbols too old to name. Eyes, hands, and stars, all pointing toward a single circle. When he reached the end, he found himself in a vast chamber where light trembled like breath upon water. At its center lay the colossal face of a being half covered in sand. Its features were so serene, so heartbreakingly human, that he fell to his knees. The lamp flickered and went out. In the dark, he felt warmth rising from the stone, as though the being beneath was not gone, but merely dreaming. And from the silence came a sound. Not a voice, but a slow, rhythmic exhale, like wind through a cavern. He fled before dawn. When he returned weeks later, the entrance had vanished, swallowed whole by the dunes. Others who have searched for the valley speak of strange phenomena. Compasses spinning without reason, stars shifting places, voices carried by the wind that sound like their own thoughts whispered back to them. A few have gone mad. Most simply turn back. But some, those who stay long enough, claim to feel peace unlike any other. A calm so profound it blurs the boundary between living and dreaming. They say that as night falls, and the horizon becomes one unbroken sea of shadow, the dunes themselves begin to breathe. And in that slow rhythm, something ancient listens. Archaeologists who once studied the region uncovered fragments of tablets describing a final ritual, the rite of descent. It told of gods who, weary of their own perfection, sought rest. To do so, they shed their light, their names, and their voices, burying themselves beneath the sands they had once shaped. The ritual was said to ensure balance, for even the divine must one day sleep, to dream the world anew. The text ends with a single line. When they awaken, dawn will be reborn. No one knows what that means. Perhaps it is prophecy. Perhaps it is remembrance. At twilight, when the air cools and the sky deepens into indigo, the desert becomes strangely luminous. The sands glint like powdered stars, and the horizon hums faintly, a sound like breath drawn through the hollow of the world. Travelers resting by their fires often feel the ground vibrate softly, as if something vast and patient stirs beneath. They tell stories to calm themselves, stories of gods who will one day rise again, not in anger, but in renewal. But the elders of the desert smile when they hear such tales. No, they say, they will not rise. They are not meant to. Their dreaming is what holds the world together. Their sleep is the dawn. It is said that at the edge of a vanished lake, where salt turns to frost beneath the stars, there stands a gate that opens only to moonlight. By day it is nothing more than a half-buried arch of pale stone, cracked and softened by wind. But when night unfurls its quiet veil and the moon rises like a patient lamp, the arch seems to wake. Shadows gather in its curve, and the empty air beyond it deepens into something that feels like water, dark, mirror still, as if the lake has returned in silence to remember itself. Travelers who find this place do not speak loudly. They step lightly, as one would in a shrine, for even their footfalls seem to echo longer than they should, drawn toward a listening that has no name. And perhaps they are right, for even now, when storms sweep across the desert and the dunes shift in waves that glow beneath lightning, one can almost see the curve of a shoulder, the faint outline of an arm, the sweep of a ribcage large enough to cradle a mountain. Between thunderclaps, the silence feels alive, vast and tender, like something breathing just beneath hearing. Some nights, when the moon leans low over the horizon, her light falls perfectly across one buried face. The sand glitters along the eyelids, and for a moment it seems as though the stone moves. A flicker, a tremor, the smallest shift of expression. The wind pauses. The stars grow still. It feels as though the entire desert holds its breath. Then the wind returns, the sand flows again, and the face disappears, leaving only the impression of peace. It is said that the gods do not dream as we do. Their dreams are worlds vast, endless, slow. Perhaps everything we know, everything we are, exists within one such dream, a single thought resting beneath an infinite sky. And when we sleep, when our own breath deepens and our hearts quiet, perhaps it is not just rest we enter, but communion. Perhaps the gods still reach us through the corridors of sleep, reminding us that even the infinite needs to close its eyes. So if you ever find yourself standing on the edge of that endless plain, with only wind and starlight for company, listen closely. The world may sound empty, but it is not. Beneath your feet something ancient exhales. The sand shifts softly, the horizon hums, and somewhere under all that dust, the gods continue to dream, not gone, not forgotten, but holding the silence that keeps the stars awake. Whispers tell us that the lake was once a map of the sky, spreading a mirror across the valley where stars could look down and see their faces. The people who lived along its shores believed the moon was an ancient keeper of thresholds. They would wait for nights of fullness, marked by the moon's round breath, and assemble by candlelight along the water's edge. Their elders taught that a gate is not merely a passage, but a vow, a chosen movement from the known into the hidden. And so they sang soft songs to steady their hearts, and held lanterns close to the ground, as if guiding the earth itself toward the opening. It is said that at the farthest rim of the world, beyond the reach of ocean or time, there stands a gate that no traveler has crossed twice. It rises from the edge of a cliff that overlooks nothing. No sea, no land, only a vast trembling of air and light. They call it the Gate of Returning Light. It is neither made of stone nor metal, but of something that glows from within, a substance that seems alive, as if forged from the last breath of a dying sun. The gate has no hinges, no lock, no threshold. It stands open, eternally open, yet no one who has stepped through has ever returned. Some say it leads to another world, one made of memory and radiance. Others believe it is not a passage at all, but a mirror, showing the traveler the moment they first became aware of light. The first mention of the gate appears in the journals of a wandering astronomer who claimed to have followed a column of aurora far south until it touched the earth. He wrote of a structure that shimmered like heat over snow, rising taller than sound, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The air around it was filled with quiet music, tones so faint they seemed to form within the chest rather than the ear. He approached it slowly, each step muffled as though the ground itself held its breath. When he came within reach, he felt warmth on his face, as if the gate recognized him. Then the music ceased. He closed his eyes, took one step forward, and was never seen again. His notebook was found years later, resting on the stones near where the light had once been. The last line read simply, "The dawn begins inside. Whispers tell that the gate does not belong to any age. It appears when the world forgets itself, when stars vanish, when the air stands still, when the hearts of the living grow too heavy to hold their own light. Then, without warning, it flickers into being, a column of slow, golden breath shimmering against the sky. Those who see it say it feels familiar, as though the world itself has turned to face them. Some believe the gate is the final memory of creation, the place where the first light entered the universe. Others say it is the reflection of the soul's last vision before it leaves the body. It is not death, they whisper, but recognition, the moment when all the scattered pieces of light within us return home. In the oldest texts, the gate is called the unfolding horizon. It is said to stand where day and night touch, not in battle, but in embrace. There, the boundaries of time dissolve, and the past begins to dream of the future. Those who walk toward it feel their memories loosen. The weight of years falls away like dust. The air grows brighter with every step, yet softer too, until brightness becomes warmth, and warmth becomes peace. One tale speaks of a woman who sought the gate after losing all she loved. She traveled through valleys of salt and cities of smoke, through forests turned to glass by lightning, until at last she stood before it. When she gazed into its glow, she did not see another world, but thousands of moments she had lived, forgotten, and dreamed. Her own face as a child, her mother's hands, the eyes of those she had lost, all appeared, then folded gently into one another, dissolving like dew. She understood then that nothing is truly lost. It only changes shape, waiting to be seen again in another light. The gate flickered once. The woman smiled, and then she too was gone, though some say her laughter can still be heard on the wind that moves through that lonely plain, a soft echo of joy carried beyond the edge of sound. Pilgrims have long sought it, though few admit why. Perhaps it is not the promise of elsewhere that draws them, but the hope of remembrance, the desire to be seen completely, without fear, without separation. For the gate is said to show not what lies ahead, but what has always been within. It does not open outward, it opens inward. Monks who study the legends speak of a teaching carved once into the cliffs near where the gate is said to appear. You are not the traveler. You are the light returning. They believe the gate is not a destination but a mirror of awakening, that when the heart grows still enough, the gate appears everywhere. In a reflection on water, in a stranger's eyes, in the brief silence between breaths. Beneath the silence of our present hour, one can feel them still. Figures gathering in a long, slow procession, robes grazing the dust, small bells tied at the wrist to measure the hush. They carried no treasures, only names, names of their ancestors, names of the unborn, names of rivers that had not yet found the sea. In the language of that valley, a name was a thread, and to carry a thread through the gate was to mend the tear between memory and time. Moonlight touched the stone, and the arch drank it in like a thirsty mouth. The lake, unmoving, held the sky without a ripple. On such nights, they believed the earth and the heavens understood one another, and the gate stood exactly between them like a breath held in the chest. Some say it waits for us all, patient as dawn. That at the end of every lifetime, when the body sighs its final breath and the stars dim one by one, the gate flickers gently before us. Not as a summons, but as a homecoming. And when we step through, there is no sound, no flash, no farewell. Only light, unfolding endlessly inward. If you ever wander the world's edge and find yourself standing before a horizon that hums softly like the sound of your own pulse, be still. Lay your hand upon your chest. Feel the rhythm there, steady, ancient, familiar. You will know what to do, for the gate does not ask. It remembers. Step forward if you wish. There is no threshold, only return. And when you pass through, you will not vanish. You will dissolve into radiance, into the same first breath that once kindled the stars. And the light, recognizing itself, will whisper your name one final time, not as farewell, but as welcome home. It is said that beyond the borders of every map, in a land no cartographer has ever claimed, there once stood a city built entirely from sound. Its towers were made of whispering air, its streets paved with echoes, its walls formed by the breath of those who had once longed to be remembered. The elders called it Ares, the city of whispers and wind, a place where silence itself came to listen. What lay beyond? The priests answered with parables rather than maps. They called it the realm of echoes, where meanings return to those who are patient. It was not a place of spectacle or lightning, but of listening, a chamber of night where the universe speaks in its gentlest voice. Some said the gate was a teaching rather than a doorway, that it opened the inward lake, the dark water behind the ribs, where old griefs float like silver leaves and old joys glow beneath. Others insisted the gate was literal. They had stepped forward on full moon nights and felt the air thicken, cool, become suddenly fragrant, as if filled with rain that never fell. A step more and the world dissolved into a deeper dusk, where the moon's reflection moved like a living script across the floor. The first travelers to speak of it returned dazed. Their voices changed, softer, slower, as if still trying not to disturb something vast. They said the city did not appear suddenly, but grew around them, one sound at a time. First the faint toll of a bell, then the sigh of unseen corridors, then a voice, familiar but impossible to name, calling their name from very far away. When they turned, the streets had already formed, shimmering like heat. And before them, rising from the shimmering haze, stood the city. Its gates were transparent, like the inside of a shell. Its columns moved slightly with each gust, never still, never breaking. Nothing was solid, yet nothing fell. The air itself carried weight, the way a lullaby carries memory. Beneath the vaulted sky, buildings leaned toward one another as if confiding secrets. Windows held no glass, only rippling veils of sound that swayed with every breath of wind. They say every word ever spoken passes through this city at least once. Every confession whispered to the dark, every prayer left unfinished, every lullaby sung to no one. All of them drift here eventually, drawn by the quiet pull of remembrance. Within its endless halls, voices do not fade. They transform. A cry becomes a chord, a sigh becomes a song, and every word becomes part of the great murmuring that fills the air like the pulse of the earth itself. The people of Ares, if people they were, did not speak in language. They moved with the rhythm of sound, each step releasing a faint tone, soft as breath through a reed. When they passed one another in the streets, their tones harmonized briefly, then drifted apart, like passing notes in a great, unseen symphony. They built no monuments, for their memory was music. To be remembered, they said, was to continue resonating in another's breath. At the city's heart stood a great dome, vast, translucent, trembling with a low hum that never ceased. They called it the Hall of Listening. It was said that if you stood within it long enough, you could hear the moment the world began, not as thunder or explosion, but as the soft inhale of creation before it spoke its first word. The monks who reached it told of the sound of galaxies turning, of winds older than time brushing against the edge of thought. They said the hum beneath everything was not chaos, but compassion, the universe breathing through every living thing. Those who lingered too long began to lose their own voices. Their words dissolved into wind, yet none felt fear. They said it was not silence that replaced their speech but understanding, a knowing that did not require sound. They became part of the harmony, their very being joining the eternal resonance that shaped the city. Over centuries, Ares faded from maps and memory. Some say it drifted upward into the sky, ascending as sound sometimes does when no one is left to hear it. Others believe it folded inward, becoming the faint ringing we sometimes hear in moments of perfect quiet, that high, trembling tone that arrives for no reason and fades just as softly. The mystics call it the memory of Aries. Yet, there are nights when the wind changes direction, when it moves not sideways but upward, carrying with it the scent of rain and the echo of laughter not your own. On such nights, if you listen carefully, you may hear a pattern hidden in the breeze. Tones weaving and unweaving, harmonies almost familiar. It might be a melody you once heard as a child, or a lullaby someone once sang to you and forgot. That is the city passing by, invisible, eternal, brushing lightly against the world before vanishing again into its quiet dimension of air. There are those who claim the city has not vanished at all, but is always with us, layered between the moments we call silence, the breath between words, the pause between heartbeats, the hush that follows the last note of a song before applause begins. In those spaces, the city waits, shimmering, invisible, alive. It is said that when the end of days arrives, and all the world grows still, Aries will descend once more. Its streets will take shape in the dust of our final sighs. The hall of listening will open, and all the voices that ever were, every prayer, every cry, every song, will rise together in one vast chord that will echo through eternity. That sound will not destroy. It will heal. It will gather everything scattered by time and return it, whole, to the breath that first released it. On the arch itself, the stone bears markings that the wind has tried to erase. Spirals, crescent lines, a braid of dots that curve and pause like the beat of a distant drum. When the moon sits directly over the valley, the carvings quicken. Their edges gleam, and fine shadows lengthen as though the stone has learned to breathe. Scholars who arrived centuries later gave these marks ordinary names. They called them calendars, tidal counts, ceremonial geometry. Perhaps they are right, but the old stories say the marks are instructions for the heart. Slow your pulse, even your breath. Let thought become a bird that settles into your palm. The gate does not open for haste. And then, perhaps there will be no more words, only resonance, only the steady hum of existence remembering itself. So if, one quiet evening, you stand beneath the wind and hear it speak, not in words, but in warmth, in rhythm, in the trembling between, do not turn away. Close your eyes. Let the air move through you. For the wind is not passing by. It is inviting you home. And when you listen closely enough, you may realize what all who found Aries came to understand. We are not the ones who make sound. We are the sound, forever rising, forever returning, carried by the wind that remembers every voice. It is said that high upon a forgotten plateau, where clouds drift low enough to touch and the air smells faintly of thunder, there lies a mirror half buried in stone. Its frame is carved from dark crystal veined with silver, and though centuries of wind have scoured its surface, it still shines whenever rain begins to fall. The people of the mountain call it the mirror that remembers the rain. The mirror faces the open sky. Around it, the ground is smooth, as if polished by generations of kneeling. No temple surrounds it, no wall protects it, yet the air there feels consecrated, hushed. Travelers who come upon it by accident often stop without knowing why. They feel a pull, soft but insistent, like recognition. When they look into it, they do not see their own faces, but skies. Endless, rippling, alive. In the oldest legends, the mirror was not crafted but found. It was said to have formed the night the first storm touched the earth. When lightning struck a lake on that plateau, the water hardened into glass, trapping the reflection of the storm forever within. Those who later discovered it believed that it could remember, that each drop of rain that fell upon its surface left behind a vision, a story, a pulse of feeling. To them, the mirror was alive, not with consciousness, but with recollection. It did not show the future or the past, but the continuity between them, the unbroken rhythm of falling and rising, of giving and returning. This valley was once a basin of sweet water. Reeds grew here in green ribbons, and night insects sang. Then the river that fed it withdrew, obedient to mountains and time. The lake thinned, retreated, became mirror patches, then coins, then nothing but a lace of memory drawn in salt. The people grew quiet. Many left, Those who remained made a promise to the moon. Even if the water vanishes, we will hold the reflection. Even if the gate forgets, we will remember. They waited through seasons when the lake was a rumor of light on the ground, and still they gathered when the moon was round. They brushed the arch with oil, swept the salt with branches of dry willow, and told the little ones not to be afraid of emptiness. Emptiness, the elders would murmur, is where meaning comes to drink. When rain touches the mirror, it does not bead or scatter. It moves slowly across the surface, tracing luminous paths that spiral inward. Watch long enough, and you might see images forming within the ripples. Faces, cities, constellations, fleeting as the rain itself. The elders say the mirror reflects not the world above, but the dreams of the water returning home. For every raindrop, they whisper, remembers the cloud, and every cloud remembers the sea. Many who have stood before it describe a strange calm, the sense that the rain is listening. Their hearts slow, their thoughts soften. One monk wrote in his final journal, I stood before the mirror, and it began to rain within me. He was found days later, seated still beside it, his face tilted upward as if waiting for an answer only the sky could give. The villagers tell of a woman who once lived in the valley below, whose grief was so deep that it changed the weather. Wherever she walked, mist followed. Her husband had died in the mountains, swallowed by an avalanche during the spring thaw. For months she searched for him, calling into the fog until her voice became part of it. When she found the mirror, she knelt beside it and wept until the rain itself seemed to echo her sorrow. As her tears fell upon its surface, the reflection shifted, clouds parted, revealing her husband's face, not in suffering, but in peace. He did not speak, yet his expression said enough. The rain ceased, the woman smiled once, and was never seen again. Some say she became part of the sky, her voice now a note within every storm. Scientists have studied the mirror. They call it a geological anomaly, fused quartz shaped by lightning, its surface responsive to humidity and temperature. But even they admit the phenomenon of sound around it cannot be explained. For when rain begins, a faint tone rises from the ground, harmonic, constant, neither natural nor mechanical. It is not heard so much as felt, vibrating beneath the skin. Instruments register nothing, yet all who stand near agree on its presence. They describe it as the voice of water remembering its way home. At dusk, when clouds bruise the horizon and thunder rolls like a heart too vast to name, the mirror glows faintly. Lightning strikes somewhere beyond sight, and for an instant, the plateau becomes ocean, reflections rippling outward, carrying fragments of light across the stone. Then, as quickly as it came, the glow fades, and only silence remains. But the air retains the scent of rain long after the sky clears, as though memory itself has soaked into the earth. There is a saying among the mountain hermits, the sky forgets quickly, but the rain remembers. They believe the mirror exists to teach that nothing truly falls away, that every ending is simply water finding its next beginning. When they meditate before it, they do not seek visions or wisdom. They simply breathe with the rhythm of the storm, feeling each drop strike the surface like the ticking of a clock too ancient for time. Sometimes, when night follows rain and the stars return, the mirror still gleams faintly, though no light touches it. Walk close enough and you may see your own reflection then, not as you are but as something softer. Your outline blurred, your eyes calm, your edges made of cloud. And for a moment you may understand. The mirror does not show what stands before it. It shows what remains. Because every drop that falls, every tear, every ocean, every life, all of it returns eventually to the same vast sky. And perhaps the mirror remembers not the rain itself, but the promise it carries, that everything broken will one day find its way back into the light. If you ever climb that plateau, wait for the weather to turn. Let the first drops fall on your hands. Sit beside the mirror and listen. The rain will speak in a language of rhythm, of return. You will not need to understand it. You will only need to feel. For in that sound, in that soft percussion of falling water, something ancient stirs. Some nights, those rare nights when clouds parted like slow curtains, The moon laid itself upon the valley floor so perfectly that the arch seemed to stand in two worlds at once. One carved in stone, the other woven in reflection. Those who dared to step through spoke of a sensation like cool silk on the skin, and a silence that made their own names sound new within the mouth. A few returned with simple gifts. A memory mended, a sorrow eased into sleep, an answer that did not use words. One woman, gray-eyed and gentle, laid her palm against the arch upon her return and whispered, "It listens." When asked what, she only smiled. Whatever you bring, not the past, not the sky, but the quiet knowing that everything once lost is only on its way home. The storm will end, the clouds will drift, and as you rise to leave, the mirror will keep shining, the surface smooth, alive, remembering, a silent witness to all that falls, and all that finds its way back again. There are tales of a night when the moon failed to rise, veiled by a storm that walked the length of the horizon. The people assembled anyway. In the dark, they lit no lanterns. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a weave of warmth, and repeated the old promise. Even without light, we will keep the reflection. They closed their eyes until the darkness softened and turned vast. Some said that in that sightless hour, the gate glowed from within, the way embers glow beneath ash. If anyone stepped through, history did not write it down. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. You might ask what happens here now, with the lake gone and the valley quiet. The answer is gentle. The place keeps breathing. Wind comes at dusk and combs the salt in delicate lines that mimic water. Owls cross the arch in soundless arcs, as if measuring the night with their wings. Sometimes, a traveler arrives carrying a private ache, and sits beneath the curve of stone until the ache changes shape. No miracle announces itself, only the soft rearrangement of weight in the chest, as though the heart has set something down on the other side. When the moon is full, stand a little off-center and look through the gate. The valley will appear as a silver sheet laid flat to the earth, and the sky above will seem to pour into it with quiet ease. In that simple image, the heaven resting upon the ground, a truth hums. Doorways do not always lead away. Some open downward, some inward, some return you to your own shoreline, washed in calmer tide. The elders said the gate is not a command. It is an invitation. It is the moon asking the lake to remember, and the lake asking the moon to be kind. Beneath the silence, the carvings hold. Beneath the carvings, the stone remembers water. Beneath the water, the earth remembers the first mirror the sky ever used. The arch stands within these layers like a single line of poetry left unbroken by time. If you place your hand upon it, you may feel a faint coolness that lingers even in summer, as if the stone drinks moonlight and keeps a little for those who come late. And if, on some unhurried night, you walk toward that pale curve while the valley glows, breathe slowly. Let the salt crackle softly under your steps. Let the old fear loosen its knot. The gate does not judge. It is only a remembering, raised in stone. At its threshold, listen for the smallest sound. A ripple that is not water, a bell that no one rang, your own name arriving from very far away. Step if you must, or sit and let the moon pass through you like a bright tide. When the light thins and the valley dims, nothing dramatic occurs. The arch resumes its daytime stillness. The salt cools. The owls vanish into their dark rooms. Yet something endures, a hush carried in the bones, a softer way of being seen. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And here, at the gate that opens to reflection, the night waits without impatience. The moon writes its slow letter across the earth, and beyond the arch a quiet steadies, as if the world, for a breath, has found its gentlest way home. It begins with dust soft, rising in thin sighs as a traveler's hand brushes across stone. Beneath the dim light of an oil lamp, the faint outline of a map emerges on a wall deep within a cavern of red earth. No ink stains the surface, no parchment curls at the edge. The map is carved, delicate, trembling lines etched by fingers that seem to remember rather than see. It shows no coastlines we know, no cities we can name, and yet, it feels familiar. The rivers bend like old recollections. The mountains follow the shape of breath itself. Some say it is the oldest map in the world. Others whisper it is not a map at all but a memory, drawn by those who once dreamed the earth into being. It is said the cartographers of that forgotten age did not use tools or compasses. They worked in silence, eyes closed, tracing the pulse beneath their wrists. They believed every being carried within their heart a memory of creation, a landscape folded within the soul. When they drew, they were not recording what they saw, but recalling what the world once was, before time hardened it into geography. Their temples were chambers of echo, their parchment stone cooled by centuries of breath. And in the center of each map lay no capital, no empire, only a spiral, a soft curve inward, marking not place, but return. Somewhere, in that spiral, begins the story of a scribe whose name has dissolved like mist. She lived among dunes where wind sang through the bones of temples long surrendered to sand. Night after night, she sat beneath a hanging lamp, staring at a blank sheet of bark paper. The elders said she was chosen to remember what others had forgotten, to draw the lost shape of the world before flood and forgetting. Each evening, as twilight fell into the soundless dark, she would dip her fingers in ash mixed with water and begin to trace. Her hand moved as though guided by a rhythm older than her own body. The curves she drew followed no rule, and yet when morning came, her work would gleam faintly as if a small sun had passed across it in sleep. One day a wanderer came, a man cloaked in dust and shadow. He asked her what she drew. She answered softly, "The places that once existed, but only within remembrance." He smiled, though not in disbelief, and said, "Then draw me the way home." That night she worked until dawn. When the first light entered the chamber, she looked upon what her hand had made. A trail that wound through hills unseen, through rivers that gleamed like thought, and at its end, not a destination, but a single point of light. The man thanked her and left. None saw him again, but some say that every time a star falls, it follows the line she drew for him. Through centuries, scholars found fragments of her work, burned into clay, pressed into marble, whispered through legends. The lines changed slightly each time, as if alive, as if the map itself continued to remember even as those who studied it forgot. When these fragments were laid together, they did not form a world we know. Instead, they outlined a shape eerily similar to the human heart, chambers, pathways, rivers of pulse. The scholars dismissed it as coincidence. The poets did not. They said the map showed not where to go, but how to feel one's way through the dark. It is said the map held more than topography, it held music. When touched, its lines seemed to hum faintly, like a note waiting to complete itself. Some believed the resonance came from quartz in the stone. Others believed it came from memory itself, the vibration of something once alive. At night, when wind passed over the carvings, the tone would change, low to high, soft to softer. A lullaby for a world that forgot its own beginning. Many have tried to redraw it. Each time, the lines blur, the shapes drift, the memory fades. It resists translation, as though it belongs only to dream. A few have claimed to see new lands appear in its folds, islands that shimmer and vanish when light shifts, oceans made of air. There are whispers that the spiral at its center is not a symbol but a gate, a turning inward where distance becomes thought. To enter the map, one must close their eyes and follow not direction, but emotion, the quiet pull of longing that leads back to the source. Beneath layers of dust, the temple still holds that first carving. It lies half-covered, half-revealed, like something shy. The walls around it are marked with soot and the residue of fire, as if someone tried to destroy it and failed. Standing before it, the air feels different, heavier, more intimate. You begin to sense a pulse not your own. The lines seem to move when you are not looking. And in that movement, you realize the map is not showing where the world once was, but what it remembers of itself. Perhaps that is why it survives. Because memory cannot truly die, it only sleeps. Each line, each curve, each forgotten spiral hums with the faint promise of awakening. Those who linger there long enough say that sometimes, when the wind aligns and the moonlight leans through the broken roof, the map flickers faintly, as though illuminated from beneath by something remembering itself. Some call it illusion, some call it truth. But in that moment, under that dim, trembling glow, you feel the strange certainty that the earth itself once dreamed, and that this map is its dream, recorded in the language of stone and silence. And when you step away, when the lamp fades and the chamber returns to shadow, the map seems to recede, dissolving once more into the rock, leaving only a faint scent of ash and the quiet thought. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was always meant to be remembered. It is said that beneath the sleeping dunes of a forgotten desert lies a city no map remembers. A labyrinth of corridors and vaulted halls carved into the earth by hands long vanished. At its heart rests a library, older than any empire, sealed beneath centuries of sand. No door guards its entrance. No inscription welcomes the seeker. Only the wind knows the path, tracing its soft fingers through cracks in the stone, carrying whispers of pages that have not turned in 1,000 years. The story begins with silence, that thick, holy silence that follows after wind has stilled. Then, faintly, the sound of shifting dust. Somewhere below, a breath moves, slow, deliberate, as if the earth itself is exhaling. For those who claim to have found the way down, it begins with a stair of limestone worn smooth by time. The air cools with each step, tasting of minerals and forgotten fire. Light fades, replaced by a blue dimness that feels neither of day nor night. And then a door or something like it, a great stone slab half lowered, half forgotten. Push it gently, and the air sighs back. Ancient, dry, but alive. Inside, the library waits. The shelves are carved directly into the walls, each one lined with scrolls and tablets that crumble at the faintest touch. Between them hang small bells made of copper, suspended on fine cords. No one knows why they were placed there, but when the wind stirs, they ring faintly. 1,000 small notes shimmering in the dark, as if the words themselves are breathing. The sound does not echo. It dissolves, like incense in prayer. Whispers tell us that this library was built by those who feared both memory and forgetting. They believed that truth was a living thing, fragile, luminous, easily bruised by human noise. And so they chose silence as its guardian. Every text within these walls, it is said, was written not to be read, but to be felt. Ink was mixed with oil drawn from sacred trees, so that words would not fade but sink into the parchment, becoming texture rather than script. Some scrolls are said to hum faintly when held near the ear, as if reciting themselves in a tongue the mind cannot grasp. There are legends of scribes who worked here without light, trusting their fingers more than their eyes. They called themselves the listeners. They believed that language had once been born of wind and breath, that before alphabets, before sound, truth had shape but no name. To write, they would breathe upon stone, trace symbols with fingertips dampened in oil, and whisper the sound of each thought before letting it go. What they created were not books, but echoes, relics of ideas waiting to be reawakened by those who could still listen. When explorers from the later age stumbled upon the site, they found the outer city first, towers half-buried, courtyards swallowed by dunes, statues worn smooth by centuries of storm. And beneath it, faint vibrations. A low hum, almost musical. They followed the sound until it led them downward, through the throat of the earth, into the chamber where dust hung like mist. They reported that when they first entered, the air seemed to ripple, as though their very presence disturbed a dream. Their torches flickered blue, and every flame bent toward the same point. A black doorway carved with a single mark, a circle within a circle. The breath of the desert passed through it like a slow sigh. Inside, their voices died immediately. Words would not rise. One explorer wrote that it felt as though sound itself was being absorbed, swallowed by the air, made part of the silence. He said he felt watched, not by eyes, but by attention itself, as if the room was awake, aware of him. He saw the shelves, the scrolls, the bells. He saw symbols cut into the floor, patterns that resembled constellations, though none matched the sky above. He tried to record them, but his pen refused to write. He said the ink thickened like blood in the cold. Later, his notebook was found above ground, buried in sand beside his tent. The last line read, "The silence speaks, if you stay long enough to forget what speech means." No one knows what became of him. Some say he joined the dust. Some say he finally understood what the library was, not a place of knowledge, but of remembering. For the ancients believed that forgetting was not loss, but rest. They built their archives to hold dreams too delicate for daylight, preserving them until the world grew quiet enough to hear them again. At night, when the moon leans over the dunes, the ground hums faintly. A tremor like distant thunder but softer, more rhythmic. Some travelers who camp nearby claim they've heard a low murmur rising from below, as if 1,000 voices are breathing in unison. They describe it not as haunting, but calming, a lullaby carried through stone. Others say it is the sound of pages turning in the dark, the slow inhalation of thought as it remembers itself. If you were to descend there now, the dust would part around you like a tide. You would smell cedar and mineral and age. The air would taste faintly metallic, as though the past has been preserved in its breath. And if you stood still long enough, you might feel it. A warmth near the walls, the soft pulse of knowledge that refuses to die. You would reach for a scroll, but before your hand touched it, the air itself might whisper, "Listen." Because that is what this place asks of those who enter, not to read, but to listen. To let the silence carry its meaning like music beneath the surface of thought. To realize that every word ever spoken still exists somewhere, suspended in the dust. Perhaps that is why the library remains hidden, because we have grown too loud to hear it. Perhaps it waits for a quieter age, one willing to walk barefoot through the halls of silence and remember that wisdom is not always spoken. If the wind still breathes through its corridors tonight, it carries the faintest of murmurs, not in any tongue we know, but in rhythm and pulse. And maybe, if you lean close to the earth and listen with closed eyes, you'll catch it too. The whisper of parchment sighing beneath the weight of time. The soft chime of copper bells swaying in the dark. The sound of dust remembering how to speak. And in that sound, in that breathless hush beneath the earth, something within you will pause, tremble, and understand. That some knowledge was never meant to be found. Only heard. Only felt. Only remembered when the world grows quiet again. It is said that somewhere beyond the edge of maps, where the sea folds into itself and the horizon shivers like a dream, a city sleeps beneath the waves. Not drowned, not dead, simply waiting. They call it Nam-Eris, though the name drifts between tongues like foam on water. At night, when the moon spills her silver across the ocean's skin, shapes stir far below. Pillars, arches, stairways that seem to breathe. Fishermen tell of faint lights glowing under the tide, like the last embers of an ancient civilization still whispering to the deep. Long ago, the city stood proudly upon an island that no longer rises above the surface. Its towers were carved from coral and marble, white as bone, gleaming under a sun that once lingered longer over that part of the sea. The people of Nam-Eris believed the ocean was alive, not merely vast and merciless, but listening. They built their temples along the water's edge, aligning each one with the pull of the moon, so that tides entered and withdrew like the breath of a god. When the waves touched their steps, the priests would kneel and place their hands upon the rippling surface, whispering the same question each night. "Are you still awake?" It is said the ocean always answered, not in words, but in motion. A sudden stillness, a ripple without wind, a pulse felt through the soles of the feet. They kept their records not on paper but on shells, etched with spirals so fine they could be read only by moonlight. And when the ocean grew restless, the shells would hum softly, warning those who listened that the balance had shifted. The city knew how to live with the tides. What they did not know was how to live without them. Then came the long silence. The sea, for reasons no one remembers, rose higher each year. First it kissed the gardens, then the markets, then the doorsteps of the shrines. Some fled inland, carrying their shell libraries and sea prayers with them. Others stayed. The priests said the water was not an ending but a calling, that the ocean was reclaiming what was once its own. They gathered on the highest terrace, wrapped in blue cloth that shimmered like waves, and sang their last hymn. Those who watched from afar swore that as the tide rose over them, the sound did not cease. It continued, muffled but clear, beneath the surface, as though the sea itself had taken the song into its keeping. Centuries passed. The island vanished. The world forgot. Yet on certain nights, when the tide is low and the moon is full, the ocean reveals fragments of the old city. The curve of a colonnade, the tip of a dome, a single marble stair glistening beneath the surf. Divers who venture there return changed. They speak of streets that glow faintly from within, of statues whose eyes seem to move, following the light that filters through the water. They describe the silence below not as emptiness, but as listening, a living stillness, like standing in the heart of a dream that has not yet ended. Some have brought back relics, shards of carved stone inscribed with symbols of waves and moons intertwined. When examined, they are warm to the touch, as if holding a memory of sunlight too stubborn to fade. One explorer, a woman whose name the currents have also taken, claimed to have reached the central plaza. She described mosaics so intricate that each tile seemed to hold a tiny reflection of the sky. But what she remembered most was a door. Enormous, smooth, and sealed. Across its face, she said, was written a single line. The sea does not forget its children. It is said she wept when she read it, though no one knows why. Perhaps she heard something there, in the rhythm of the waves pressing against stone. A heartbeat not her own. When she surfaced, the moon had moved, and the door had disappeared beneath the shifting tide. Sailors still speak of that place in low voices. They say if you drop anchor above Narration on a still night, you can hear the faintest choral hum rising through the hull. Not eerie, not mournful, but peaceful, like a lullaby sung from the floor of the ocean. Some claim the song carries words, a greeting, a reminder, or perhaps a promise. Others say it is only the memory of air trapped in the ruins. But those who have truly listened insist otherwise. They say the city still breathes, that the sea keeps it safe beneath her vast, translucent heart. Once in a century, a strange light is seen along the horizon, pale, wavering, like dawn arriving from the wrong direction. Those who have witnessed it swear the sea flattens perfectly for a moment, calm as glass, and shapes rise beneath the glow. Towers like fingers reaching upward, domes silvered by moonlight, streets flickering with phantom reflections. Then the light fades, and the sea folds itself again, as though nothing ever stirred. Perhaps the city lifts its face now and then to remind the sky that it remembers. Perhaps it rises to breathe. The scholars call it a mirage, an illusion born of heat and current. But the poets know better. They say it is the city stretching in its sleep, that one day, when the world grows quiet enough to listen, Narration will rise not in stone but in sound. The tide will recede, revealing not ruins, but memory made visible. And all who stand upon the shore will hear the old hymn once more, carried through the salt wind like the voice of time itself. If you walk the beach on such a night, you may find yourself pausing, unsure why. The waves seem to lean closer, as though waiting. The air thickens with the scent of rain and distance. You might feel the pull of something beneath, not danger, not fear, but recognition. You will not see the city. You will not hear its song. But something in you will answer. An ache as soft as the tide's retreat. A remembrance older than speech. For the ocean never forgets. It carries every whisper, every breath, every life that has ever touched its surface. And beneath its endless motion, the city still waits, quiet, patient, luminous in its dreaming. Perhaps the people of Narration were right. Perhaps they were never lost, only returned. And perhaps, when we listen to the sea at night, what we hear in its rhythm is not the crash of waves, but the faint, enduring heartbeat of a city that remembers us still. It is said that high in the mountains where the clouds thin to threads of light, a temple stands carved from a single slope of stone, its terraces aligned not with the sun, but with the stars. Few have ever found it. Fewer still have returned. Those who have say the air there is thinner than silence, and every breath feels like borrowing from the heavens. At night, when the world below vanishes into mist, the temple glows faintly, not from fire, but from starlight, as if the sky itself descends to rest upon its roof. The path that leads to it is neither marked nor straight. It winds through valleys of pale moss and rivers that whisper in languages the wind no longer speaks. Pilgrims used to climb there in quiet processions, their lamps flickering like moving constellations. They brought no offerings of gold or grain, for the gods worshipped here were not the kind that needed gifts. They brought silence, the purest currency of devotion. The temple's great hall faces north, where the sky deepens into its oldest memories. Its walls are bare, except for a single engraving across the arch. The stars are the eyes of those who remember. Beneath that inscription, the floor is marked by circles and lines that mirror the constellations above. When night falls and the air grows crystalline, the light of those same constellations pours through narrow slits in the roof, aligning perfectly with the carvings below. The chamber becomes a mirror of the heavens, an atlas of eternity drawn in dust and light. The priests who once lived there were called the astral keepers. They were not astronomers, though they mapped the sky with an accuracy that humbles even our instruments today. They said their purpose was not to study, but to listen. For them, the stars were not distant fires, but memories, fragments of divine thoughts scattered across the fabric of night. They believed that every star was a word, every constellation a sentence, and that the entire sky was a single, ongoing prayer. Each night, when the last light of day retreated beyond the peaks, the keepers gathered upon the terrace. They wore robes dyed in deep indigo, stitched with threads of silver dust. One by one, they would face the horizon, raise their palms and close their eyes. Their prayers were not spoken but breathed, exhalations shaped into rhythm, merging with the wind. They believed that if their breath aligned with the pulse of the stars, they could remind the universe of its own music. It is said that the temple's highest spire, a tower so slender it seemed woven from air, was built to measure silence. Each level resonated with a faint tone when the wind passed through, and when the sky was clear, all tones merged into harmony. Some believed it was the sound of the stars themselves answering the prayer below. Others said it was only the mountain breathing. But those who listened carefully swore the tones carried patterns, repetitions, pauses, and variations that felt intentional, like speech in another form. Over centuries, the winds changed, the mountains eroded, and the world forgot the keepers. Yet the temple remained. It still faces north, its terraces scarred by storms but intact. Travelers who find it by accident describe an uncanny calm that descends upon them as they approach. The air seems to grow denser, and thoughts slow, dissolving into the rhythm of their own heartbeat. Inside the hall, when darkness falls, they say the stars appear twice, once above and once upon the floor, as if heaven and earth have finally met. On the western wall lies a mosaic long hidden beneath soot. When brushed clean, it reveals the image of a woman with a crown of light. Her hands cradle a sphere filled with tiny specks, a miniature sky. Scholars debate whether she represents a goddess or the night itself. But near her, carved faintly into the stone, are words that translate to, "The heavens look back," as if to remind those who gaze upward that they, too, are being seen. There are stories, soft, improbable, of wanderers who slept upon the terrace and woke to find starlight upon their skin. They said it shimmered faintly, then faded as dawn arrived, leaving only warmth behind. One old mountaineer once claimed that during a storm, when thunder rolled and clouds swallowed the night, he heard a low, harmonic hum rise from beneath the stone, vibrating through his bones. It was not fear he felt, he said, but belonging, as though the mountain and the sky had remembered his name. Those who have studied the temple say its alignment is impossible, perfect to constellations that no longer exist. It faces a pattern erased by time, a map of the heavens from a sky that predates ours. This has led some to call it the observatory of before, built by hands that understood not only stars but what stars used to be. Others suggest it is not aligned to the sky as it was, or as it is, but as it will be again. At twilight, when the first star appears, the air trembles faintly, the horizon blushes violet, and for a heartbeat, the mountain seems to hold its breath. The temple absorbs this stillness, the moment when the world hesitates between day and night. It is in this pause that something sacred stirs. The carvings glow softly, the lines on the floor shimmer, and though no one speaks, it feels as though countless voices are remembering the same forgotten prayer. Perhaps this is why the temple was built, not to call the divine down, but to remind us that we have always been part of the same song. That when we look upward in wonder, we are only answering a gaze that has never turned away. As dawn approaches, the stars fade into pale gray, and the terraces grow quiet once more. The temple breathes with the mountain, slow, patient, eternal. The priests are gone, the rituals are dust, yet the alignment holds, as if waiting for those who will listen again. And if you ever find yourself upon that peak, beneath a sky so wide it swallows thought, stand in the center of the hall. Breathe slowly. Let the silence settle like snow around you. Look up, not for answers but for recognition. You may feel it then. A pulse that moves through stone and starlight alike. A rhythm that does not belong to any one world. And in that rhythm, a voice that says nothing, yet means everything. The stars have not forgotten you.